I just recorded on the other phone the whole concept of independence, God-like independence. Now, what's interesting is that to be God-like, when we read in the scriptures that a man was made in the image of God, God made man like him unto himself. Something like that. What stands out is the independence of God. That means there is no dependency whatsoever. You can't. To be an absolute source, you have to have no relation whatsoever to anything else. That means there is no dependency. Now everything else depends upon God, but God itself is not in need of anything. Now, what I wanted to explain is that, see, all the qualities that we relate to God, almighty, all-powerful, omnipotent, all of these things have their own place, and as Abdullah explained, we use these, we describe these adjectives and these superlatives, use these superlatives in order to negate the lack of it. That means when we say God is almighty, that means God is not weak or powerless. It's powerful. But there is no limit to it, because it's just a quality that as a human being, we understand it in our mind that to be almighty is to be very, 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 very powerful, but we can go for infinite, just keep adding very, very, so much, so much, so much, ad infinitum. All of these qualities, except one. You cannot be independent even if you have an infinitesimal dependency. Yes or no? Right? Your power, your might, your knowledge, all of these things are infinite, obviously. But there's no end to it. It keeps growing. It can never get to a point and say, oh, this is the highest I can go. But for independence is, when you are independent, that means you're absolutely not dependent. You can't be independent if you're still a little bit. Doesn't matter how much, how small is your dependency on something. Impossible. So independence is I don't know if there are other qualities like independence. I don't know. The reason I'm recording this because this came to my mind and kind of right away it showed itself as very different from the other descriptions or qualities, attributes. Independence. And we are not talking about relative. In the contingent world. No. We are talking about divinity. When we say divine or Godhead is independent of all, that means it's absolutely independent. There's no relativism here whatsoever. Because anything that creates dependency, then independency cannot simply exist. Does not make any sense. Now, I remember listening to Krishnamurti, and he used an example. He said, well, when somebody wants to become intelligent, but he's on his way to become more intelligent or become intelligent, till he gets there, he's still stupid. So you cannot be intelligent when you're still in a day. There's some times that you are not intelligent, so you're not intelligent overall, right? Or the same thing, I think he also used this one. He said generosity, or maybe this is the example I saw somewhere else, but it's about the same thing. Generosity. When you are generous, means you are generous at all times. Generosity is not something that you need to think about. You don't make yourself be generous. You are generous. It is you. That's when you don't have to think about it. You don't have to make yourself do it. You don't have to plan for it. It's you. Generosity is what your being is all about. When somebody is generous, part of the day and the other part of the day is not showing that virtue, that, you know, that generosity, the virtue of generosity, means what? Means he's not generous. To be half generous is not generous. It's half generous. He's not generous. You can't use that full word for a partial generosity. And now that I'm thinking about it a little deeper, you know, this whole idea of virtue in the Chinese literature, in the Tao Te Ching, I believe it's in there, that it says a virtuous person, once he becomes conscious of his virtuosity, he's not virtuous any longer after that. That means virtue is supposed to come out of your heart, comes out of your nature, your being, your essence. That's virtue. If you need to call it a virtue, then it's not spontaneous anymore. You can still be conscious of it. I mean, when we are generous, we are virtuous, we know what we are doing. We're not blindly doing something. But we don't identify with it. That identification is the problem. That identification, when it takes place, that means our ego is still in control. And we can even go a little bit further, that because the ego is involved, it is not selfless. It has some remnants of self in there. Now, somebody can say, well, our lives here on this planet, at least in the physical, we can never be completely selfish. Hey, no problem. That's totally understandable, because we are living in a dualistic, relative, contingent realm. And especially in the physical part of it is very, very obvious that we are being pulled between two opposite poles all the time. But nonetheless, to conceptualize virtuosity, to be virtuous and identify with it, definitely in its essence is not virtue anymore. You know, it's up to an extent it is, but it's really not. It's just the same as, you're either totally intelligent, because intelligence means when you take something, observe something in its totality. That's intelligence. Not partiality, but totality. That's intelligence. So if you miss a part, but you still got most of it, that's not intelligence. That's, you got most of it. That's what it's called. So, and you can apply that pretty much to anything. So that is one of the limitations that we cannot shake off as long as we are here in the physical, for sure. Now, what happens in the spiritual, how are we going to face this, if this limitation persists or not? That's something to be seen. But nonetheless, we are still, no matter how you look at it, we are part of the created world, which is contingent realm, contingent upon the primal cause that created this creation. All right. That's enough.